You come right here. And our students.
If y'all want to spread out,
Yes, you
a
go
couple of you go on that side. Okay.
Come on in.
Come on in. The tall one's behind. Let's not cover up Lori over there. I'm never doing that.
Good morning. Thank you for being here today. This is a very important day. On the House Education and Workforce Committee, we're about to have an incredibly important hearing addressing the rise of anti-Semitism on our college campuses and universities. Joining us today to share their personal stories, we have four incredibly brave students, Talia, Bella, Aol, and Jonathan. Jewish students, faculty, and communities at these so-called elite institutions, including my alma mater, Harvard, Jewish students are facing sustained attacks from students and professors who are openly propagandizing terror. And why? Merely because these Jewish students exist. In response, campus leadership has cowered to the woke anti-Semitic mob. This fanaticism against Israel is rooted in ignorance and hatred. Our institutions of higher education are failing our next generation. They are failing Talia, Bella, Aol, Jonathan, and countless other students. The attacks on October 7th shocked the conscience of the world, marking the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. However, these atrocities were met with callous cruelty at universities across America. At Harvard, 30 radical student organizations disgustingly blamed Israel for the barbaric attacks against innocent Israelis, only for the group's actions to be brazenly defended by Harvard President Claudine Gay as, quote, free expression. Following our remarks today, the students will join my colleagues at the Education and Workforce Committee hearing, where Harvard, MIT, and Penn's leadership will likely defend desperately their indefensible recent actions and the campus culture that has enabled anti-Semitism on their campuses. Any voice who openly defends the massacre of innocents has chosen the side of terrorism. I continue to demand that Harvard President Claudine Gay resign and that Harvard and schools like it are prohibited from collecting taxpayer dollars. In the words of a Holocaust survivor and Jewish advocate who dedicated his life to ensuring the horrors of the Holocaust are not forgotten, famously said, quote, "For evil to flourish, it only requires good men to do nothing." House Republicans refuse to do nothing. In the last few months, under this Speaker's leadership, we have passed bipartisan resolutions in support of our most precious ally, Israel, holding college campuses accountable and bringing transparency to the progressive propaganda pushed on American students and paid for by our foreign adversaries. We passed an Israeli aid package, sitting with Chuck Schumer in the Senate. And this week, House Republicans will bring the Deterrent Act to the House floor, ensuring our foreign enemies cannot buy the minds of American students and protecting our national security and our college and universities research. We will continue to fight this scourge of anti-Semitism on college campuses across this country. To discuss this further, I want to turn this over to the Chairwoman of the Education and Workforce Committee, who has been a leader on this issue, Chairwoman Virginia Fox.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. My Jewish friends, colleagues, and students across America, you've been waiting 59 days for this moment of justice. In just a few short minutes, my committee will call on the presidents of Harvard, MIT, and UPenn to testify publicly about the vile demonstrations of anti-Semitism engulfing their campuses. I'm grateful for the Jewish students attending the hearing today. They've grown up in a world where stories of anti-Semitism weren't typical front-page news. All that changed on October 7th. Now anti-Semitism is spreading like wildfire. Supporters of Hamas and Palestine are painting swastikas on campus halls and throwing rocks at Hillel buildings. Universities, quick to facilitate the spread of anti-Semitism, are now slow to condemn it. The best time for college presidents to have stood up for their Jewish students was October 7th. That did not happen. The second best time is today. I look forward to their testimonies. And we're leaving now to go to the hearing because we're going to begin it on time. Thank you very much.
And first, before we head out, I want to introduce Talia Khan from MIT to share her story. Talia.
Thank you so much, Representative Fox and Representative Stefanik, for inviting me here today. My name is Talia Khan. I am an undergraduate alumna of MIT and a current graduate student at MIT. I am the daughter of a Jewish mother and an Afghan Muslim immigrant father. I am the proud president of the MIT-Israel Alliance, and I am a Jewish student currently immersed in an extremely toxic anti-Semitic atmosphere at MIT. The MIT administration, namely President Sally Kornbluth, has failed to address the crisis of rampant anti-Semitism on campus. There is a radical anti-Israel group at MIT called the CAA. In recent weeks, the CAA's anti-Semitic rhetoric has shifted the culture on campus to such an extreme of intolerance that 70% of MIT's Jewish students polled feel forced to hide their identities and perspectives. An Israeli student whose identity and personal info was sold online for a bounty has not left his dorm room in weeks out of fear due to death threats. For my part, I was forced to leave my study group for my doctoral exams halfway through the semester because my group members told me that the people at the Nova Music Festival deserved to die because they were partying on stolen land. After a postdoc at MIT said that Jewish Israelis want to enslave the world in a global apartheid system, he falsely claimed that Israel harvests Palestinian organs and implied that the, quote, average Israeli is a Nazi. The DEI officer of his department replied by telling us that nothing he said was hate speech and that the organ harvesting conspiracy theory was, quote, confirmed. Day after day, the MIT administration has failed to enforce its own rules on anti-Semitic actors, such as the interfaith chaplain intimidating Jewish students, DEI staff publicly declaring that Israel has no right to exist, faculty dismissing student concerns for their safety by telling them that if they are scared, they should just go back to Israel. CAA protesters blocking the hallways, storming the offices of the MIT Israel internship offices and harassing the staff and faculty there, and inviting dangerous outsiders to campus to join them in yelling hateful and violent chants. This is the same climate of anti-Semitism that has led to massacres of Jews throughout the centuries. This is not just harassment. This is our lives on the line. The MIT administration has punted disciplinary processes to a faculty committee on discipline, which has thus far not received a single one of our complaints. MIT admin has even failed to staff a new task force against hate, which will dually combat anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. This atmosphere is intolerable. Jewish students do not believe that the MIT administration has done an adequate job to make students feel safe on campus. President Kornbluth, please let me go back to being a scientist. Let me go back to being a student. I don't want to have to keep advocating for Jewish student safety on campus. It's not my job. It's your job. Please do your job and act now. And if you can't, I'm asking Congress to do it for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Talia. It's outrageous what's happening at MIT. We're next going to hear from Bella Ingber, who will tell us what's happening at NYU.
Thank you all for having me and for giving me the opportunity to share with you my story. My name is Bella Ingber. I am a junior at NYU, and I'm going to try to answer the following question for you from my personal experiences. What is it like to be a Jew at NYU? Being a Jew at NYU is walking to class and passing torn and defaced posters of innocent hostages with the words occupier and murderer written across their faces. It is going to Bopst Library to study and being interrupted by unauthorized protests where students and faculty call for a globalized intifada revolution, an incitement to violence against Jews everywhere, and a call for the annihilation of the Jewish state and my friends and family who live there. Being a Jew at NYU is being surrounded by students and faculty who support the murder and kidnapping of Jews because, after all, as they say, resistance is justified when people are occupied. It is being surrounded by social justice warriors and self-proclaimed feminists whose calls for justice end abruptly when the rape victims are Jews. Being a Jew at NYU has meant being physically assaulted in NYU's library by a fellow student while I was wearing an American-Israeli flag and having my attacker still roam freely throughout the campus. Being a Jew at NYU is experiencing how diversity, equity, and inclusion is not a value that NYU extends to its Jewish students. Since October 7th, the unmistakable anti-Semitism that I've experienced on campus is reminiscent of the Jew hatred I've heard about from my grandparents, Holocaust survivors, who experienced firsthand the deafening silence of their neighbors in Poland and Germany when the Nazis first rose to power. As anti-Semitic rhetoric and actions became more and more acceptable, their communities' shops were looted, their synagogues defaced, and finally, their families were taken away and perished in concentration camps. Today, in 2023, at NYU, I hear calls to gas the Jews, and I am told that Hitler was right. To the NYU administration, you are not free to selectively enforce your own rules. You are not free to refuse your Jewish students the same protections that you extend to others. NYU has adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Association's definition of anti-Semitism, which recognizes that calls to harm Jews in the name of radical ideology, calls to eradicate Israel, to deny the Jewish people their right to self-determination in their ancestral homeland is anti-Semitism that is punishable under NYU's Code of Conduct. I am a proud Jew, and I am a proud Zionist. I am the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. We are not going anywhere. Anti-Semitism and the support for terror should have no home at NYU or any other college campus. We made the promise of never again, and never again is now. Thank you.
So proud of these strong young ladies, and we stand with you absolutely. We'll hear next from University of Penn student Aol Yakobi.
Well, I am both honored and thankful to be here. I should not be here today. I should be studying for my upcoming finals. I should be taking in every moment, every experience as an undergraduate student in my senior year of college. So while I should not be here today, I am. Because 36 hours ago, I, along with most of campus, sought refuge in our rooms, as classmates and professors chanted proudly for the genocide of Jews while igniting smoke bombs and defacing school property. The neighboring university's president immediately released a statement describing this as a brazen display of anti-Semitism. He went on saying, "Silence in the face of last night's demonstration of anti-Semitism and hate near our doorstep is not an option for me." Well, the doorstep of the neighboring university is in fact Penn. And in fact, Penn's president did choose silence. The neighboring university's president swiftly denounced the incident, and yet our president cannot. Because the glorious October 7th, and you're a dirty little Jew, you deserve to die, are words said not by Hamas, but by my classmates and professors. And because despite all of this, I am adamant and hopeful that we will not accept, least of all embrace, this horrific new normal on college campuses today. On October 7th, Israel was attacked. Since October 7th, American Jews have been under attack. My name is Aol Yakobi, and I am a proud American studying at the University of Pennsylvania. I love Penn. I've wanted to attend this university since before I can remember. I'm here because the Penn I attend today is unrecognizable from the Penn I once used to know. Penn, once renowned for groundbreaking discoveries like the mRNA vaccine, is now a chilling landscape of hatred and hostility. Our university, revered for its pursuit of knowledge, has devolved into an arena where Jewish students tiptoe through their days, uncertain and unsafe. The situation at Penn has escalated into a full-blown crisis, with students openly asserting their intentions to proceed with plans with or without university permission. During COVID, strict guidelines governed everything from class attendance and graduation walks. Yet now, when students and faculty defy policies to intimidate Jewish students, where is the same resolute enforcement? For the past 3 weeks inside Houston Hall, our student center, an anti-Semitic headquarters has been erected with signs spreading Hamas propaganda. The organizers, both Penn affiliated and not, were initially asked to leave as they are trespassing on campus property. Well, 3 weeks later, they are still sleeping there, and countless Jewish students have been harassed, yet the anti-Semitic dormitory remains. Clearly, both a disregard for school policies and permission to disregard them by a university unwilling to do anything. Not only are tensions palpable, but there have also been materialized actions taken to intimidate and harm students. A bomb threat against Hillel, a swastika spray painted, the Hillel and Chabad houses vandalized, a professor posting the armed wing of Hamas's logo on Facebook, a Jewish student accosted, "Jews are Nazis," etched adjacent to Penn's Jewish fraternity house. Why doesn't the university hold the perpetrators of such acts accountable? Is the university fearful that they may offend those who wish to intimidate and harass their fellow students? Penn's ambivalence fuels a crisis that has shattered my academic sanctuary. Policies meant to safeguard us have become hollow promises. And let us be clear, if they fail Jewish students today, tomorrow they will fail the rest of us. Nonetheless, I refuse to go back to 1939 when Jews had to hide their religious symbols and hide who they are due to the intimidation and harassment of us. I used to think this was nonsense, fear-mongering, until I was made aware that Penn recommended to students, quote, not wear clothing/accessories related to Judaism. Hundreds of posters mocking the hostages featuring cows instead of humans adorned Penn's campus 2 weeks ago. While on my way to class, I was greeted with chalk reading 90% of pigs are gas chambered. As a student, despite what my university says, I do not feel safe. Let me be clear, I do not feel safe. Luckily, there are policies in place to protect students from the heinous acts I described. Unluckily, the university seems to have no interest in upholding those very policies. It's time for the soul of our university to reclaim its integrity. And it's time for me and my fellow classmates to stop worrying for our lives. Thank you.
We'll hear from one more student. They're so well-spoken, and it sends a shudder down your spine to hear this is happening in America. It's absolutely outrageous. Jonathan Frieden from Harvard Law will speak next. Jonathan.
Thank you for having me here. My name is Jonathan Frieden, and I'm currently a student at Harvard Law School. I would like to share with you what my experience has been like since October 7th at Harvard Law School, and after over 30 student clubs signed on to a statement explicitly blaming Israel for the murder and the rape of their own people. Multiple times a week, on my way to class, I walk by mobs of people chanting "From the river to the sea," which is a call for the destruction of the state of Israel. Most recently, "We have you outnumbered," and "Globalize the Intifada." An intifada is an uprising, and the last two were marked by blowing up buses and restaurants. One day a few weeks ago, I was in a study room in the law school while classes were going on, and a mob of 200 people, many of whom not only were not law students, were not Harvard affiliates, got into our building, marched down the halls chanting these phrases. Jews took off their kippot, and I watched someone hide under a desk. Many of my friends ran up to the Dean of Students and DEI office, but they had locked their doors for their own safety. This was such a clear safety concern. It was also explicitly against school policy as it disrupted class. We heard nothing from Harvard. No email, nothing. I talk to my Jewish friends on campus every day. They tell me how afraid they are to go to class. They share hate messages they are receiving from other students on social media, including comparing Jews to Nazis. And they ask us, and they ask me, for safety advice because of the lack of effective communication from the university. So you might ask, what's the administration doing? We've brought them policy violations, proof that they happened, and photos of the student handbook that were explicitly violated. When they respond, if at all, responses are empty and meaningless. Responses such as, "We are aware of the situation." This is not how the university would treat other groups. We are happy that Harvard has created an anti-Semitism advisory board, but there is no transparency about what they do. They seemingly don't have executive power. They are certainly not accessible to students. I've personally asked to meet with them multiple times for weeks, and they have not responded to me. And no one knows what happens when you send them an incident report. We are not asking to limit free speech. We are asking the university to enforce their policies, to ensure safety and a climate conducive to education. The administration has asked us to abide by the rules, and we have unequivocally. It seems more and more that this rule only applies to Jews, as broken rules are not being enforced or outwardly reprimanded. I want to be clear. This is not just about the Middle East. This is anti-Semitism, right here, in our homes, on our campuses. It is dangerous. It is going unchecked. And everyone that does not join to put a stop to it is part of the problem. I am asking, as I have been, do something. Protect Jewish people. Protect your students. Thank you.
We want to thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. They're so courageous, and House Republicans, and I know millions of the American people, empathize with you, sympathize for you, and applaud your courage. We're going to dismiss you because you need to go testify in the House Education Committee, because that's very compelling testimony. Thank you again for being here. Thank you so much. We have some very strong leaders in Congress on these issues, and I want you to hear from one of them right now, the gentleman from California, Mr. Kevin Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to echo the Speaker's sentiments, we just saw our truly profiles in courage. It is unfathomable what these young men and women are having to experience, and so many of their peers. And for them to be here today sharing their story, what they're having to go through with the whole country, takes tremendous courage. So I would just ask that you please share their stories. I think it's very important that every American know what is happening on our college campuses. This is a time of reckoning for higher education in this country. We have to ask, how is it that America's leading, most elite institutions of higher learning have been gripped by such an ancient and retrograde prejudice as anti-Semitism? How is it that institutions that have suppressed free speech for years have suddenly discovered the First Amendment as a reason not to condemn terrorism or to stop students from being harassed or bullied? How is it that university leaders who have waded in to every political issue of the day were suddenly bound by institutional neutrality when it came to the murder of children? How is it that bureaucracies devoted to diversity, equity, and inclusion have turned a blind eye to the targeting of Jewish students on their campuses, and in some cases have contributed to that hostile environment? Yes, this is a time of reckoning for higher education in this country. Our universities cost too much, their degrees deliver too little value, and they've become among the most intolerant places in the country. This is a time to rediscover the purpose of higher education, so that our universities are once again leading lights in American life, our national assets, our places of community and belonging, and where the free exchange of ideas flourishes. Nothing less than the future of our country depends on it. Thank you very much, and as part of the Education Committee, I'm headed to the hearing now as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So well said. We'll now hear from our Majority Whip, Tom Emmer.
This week will mark 2 months since Hamas murdered 1,200 people in cold blood, abducted over 200 innocent people, and brutally raped women, all because of their deep-seated hatred for the Jewish people. Good versus evil could not be more clear in this situation, but sadly, There are people who have sided with evil and chosen hatred toward their Jewish peers, including on college campuses. Perhaps even more appalling, many so-called leaders on these campuses have turned their backs on Jewish students and allowed anti-Semitism to run rampant. I commend the students who've joined us today to share their experiences. They've shown more courage, frankly, than the administrators who were supposed to protect them and support them. And I know we all look forward to hearing what these administrators have to say for themselves at Chairwoman Fox's hearing today. There has been a 388% increase in anti-Semitic incidents of harassment, vandalism, and assault in America since October 7th. Let's make no mistake about it. Never again is now. There can be no tolerance for anti-Semitism, and tolerance includes silence. So today, House Republicans will show the world where we stand by passing Congressman David Kustoff's resolution condemning the concerning rise in anti-Semitism that we've seen here at home and across the globe. There's simply no place for it in our society. And with that, I yield to our leader, Mr. Scalise.
Over and over again, we hear that saying, evil prevails when good people do nothing. This is one of those times where people need to look in the mirror. Anti-Semitism has been spreading throughout our country since the horrendous attacks by Hamas on Israel. And make no mistake, this was Hamas attacking Israel. It was an unprovoked attack. It was a brutal attack, the worst we've seen since the Holocaust. And yet since that time, not just in Israel, but here in the United States of America, on our college campuses, you've seen a growing anti-Semitism. You've seen silence from some of the heads of once great universities who are failing to protect their own students, not just Jewish students, any student that wants to stand up for Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, for all of us who support Israel. And it used to be overwhelmingly bipartisan in this country, in this Congress. You're seeing a divide. You're seeing some people not willing to stand up against it. Well, that's not going to happen with this House majority. This House Republican majority has been very vocal, not only standing with Israel, but standing up against the evil hatred of anti-Semitism. We have to be clear with a voice that we will not tolerate it. This is how history repeats itself. People wonder, can you ever get back to those days? Could that history, that evil history of the Holocaust, ever repeat itself? Well, it only repeats itself if people remain quiet. We're not going to remain quiet. These students aren't remaining quiet, and they shouldn't. They have a right to free expression. They have a right to go to school and feel safe. For those policies that those university administrators put in place to be carried out and to speak out. But if others won't speak out, we're going to continue to stand up against this evil of anti-Semitism. And with that, I'm happy to bring up our speaker.
We want to thank you all again for being here today. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu probably said it the best. This truly is a battle between good versus evil, light versus darkness, civilization versus barbarism. And the idea that this is happening on college campuses, university campuses across this land is unconscionable to us. This anti-Semitism has become all too common. It's turning to violence in some of these places. And the idea that university administrators who would not speak out, would not take care of this problem is just beyond comprehension. You heard the harrowing tales of these students. We could parade many of them up here today to share their experiences from across the land, and it must stop. No Jewish student should feel unsafe going to class or congregating in public or professing their faith. Remember, this is not who we are as Americans. The first freedom that we are guaranteed in the Bill of Rights, in our Constitution, is the freedom of religion, the free exercise of religion. It's an essential component to who we are as Americans. And that's everyone's religion, even minority faiths. For Jewish students to be targeted like this, for them to be suppressed in the expression of their faith or identity is just not who we are as a country. We have to change this. And make no mistake, what's happening at colleges today is not free speech. It's exactly the opposite. the stifling of free speech and free expression, the demonizations of students for simply living out their faith and who they are. As members of this body, we have to call out those in Congress as well who employ Hamas's talking points like from the river to the sea, which we all know is an explicit call for the extermination of Israel. History has proven that anti-Semitism, if left unchecked, will not stop for the Jewish people. It goes to other minorities and ultimately to persons of all religions. We have to stand up to this hatred. And I'm so proud to stand alongside leaders like this team behind me and all the House Republicans who have made this unequivocal where we stand, that we are for the good in this battle. We are for religious students, Jewish students across the country, and we want them to be protected and respected. With that, we'll take a few questions if you have any. Yeah.
What shifted over the past few weeks in terms of trying to maybe bring up an impeachment vote, an inquiry vote next week? What happened politically, and what's the risk to some of the members from swing districts, Biden districts, if they would go along with this because they were resistant?
Well, look, the impeachment inquiry is necessary because, as you know, our committees of jurisdiction, oversight, judiciary, ways and means, Chairman Comer and Jordan and Smith have done an extraordinary job following the facts on this. Remember, it's Article 1 of the Constitution gives the House the impeachment authority. And I've said at this podium before, next to a declaration of war, impeachment, arguably the heaviest power that the House has. Why? Because it's so serious, it's so important. In the previous couple of years, the House Democrats cheapened impeachment. They used it for partisan political purposes. They went after Donald Trump twice. I served on the impeachment defense team twice. We called those sham impeachments, snap impeachments. They were. What you're seeing right now is exactly the opposite of that. You're seeing a very deliberate investigation uncovering and following the facts, following the truth where it leads. That's what the Constitution requires the House to do. And the House Republicans have done that very methodically. So we have come to this sort of inflection point because, Chad, right now the White House is stonewalling that investigation. They're refusing to turn over key witnesses to allow them to testify as they've been subpoenaed. They're refusing to turn over thousands of documents for the National Archives. And the House has no choice, if it's going to follow its constitutional responsibility, to formally adopt an impeachment inquiry on the floor so that when the subpoenas are challenged in court, we'll be at the apex of our constitutional authority. It will be a movement, a vote of the full House, and that will allow us to continue and continue on pace. This vote is not a vote to impeach President Biden. This is a vote to continue the inquiry of impeachment, and that's a necessary constitutional step, and I believe we'll get every vote that we can.
Concern, though, among some of these moderates, that they're getting dragged into this, this is going to be a tough vote for them.
No, all the moderates in our conference understand this is not a political decision. This is a legal decision. It's a constitutional decision. And whether someone is for or against impeachment is of no import right now. We have to continue our legal responsibility, and that is solely what this vote is about. Okay.
When you released the videotapes, the video from January 6th, you talked about people withholding data to advance a partisan narrative. What do you think is incorrect about the narrative around that day, and what do you think is the accurate narrative?
We'd have to be here for a long time for me to unpack that. Look, I think the January 6th committee was a partisan exercise. They claim that it was bipartisan, but I think we all recognize that the two Republican members that served on that committee had another agenda. I think that what we got was a biased report. I think they hid some of the important evidence. And look, we want the American people to draw their own conclusions. I don't think partisan elected officials in Washington should present a narrative and expect that it should be seen as the ultimate truth on it when we know that they hid certain elements. The release of the January 6 tapes was a critical and important exercise. We want transparency. We should demand that the American people do. House Republicans trust the American people to draw their own conclusions. They should not be dictated by some narrative and accept that as fact. So they can review the tapes themselves. We're going through a methodical process of releasing them as quickly as we can. As you know, we have to blur some of the faces of persons who participated in the events of that day because we don't want them to be retaliated against and to be charged by the DOJ and to have other concerns and problems. So that's a slow process to get it done. We're working steadily on it. We've hired additional personnel to do that, and all of those tapes ultimately at the end will be out so everybody can see them and draw their own conclusion. Let me go to the back row. Back row. Back row. Back row. Well, look, we're in negotiations on that right now. I'll just tell you that any national security package has to begin with the security of our own border. That's what the American people deserve. I've been all across this country in the last couple of weeks, and no matter where I am, everyone of any party or no party is deeply concerned about the open southern border. Whether you're in New York City or you're in South Texas, people see what it's doing to our country. It is unconscionable to me that the White House would continue its current policies and not enforce our federal law. We passed H.R. 2 as a top priority, the House Republicans, 6 months ago. It's been sitting over there in the Senate collecting dust. We have to effect real policy change at the border, and that is a necessary condition to anything we do going forward. Look, we're going to get a briefing on Ukraine today from Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, and I told Mr. Sullivan very directly that there are important questions that must be answered so that we can continue with these negotiations. Among those is, what is the objective? What is the end game in Ukraine? How are we going to have proper oversight over the funds, the precious treasure of American taxpayers? Because when we go home to our town halls, they ask us a very important question. How can we be engaged in securing the border of foreign countries if we can't secure our own? And that is a question the White House has to help us answer. I've told this to the leaders in the Senate, I've told it to the White House, and I'll say it till we're blue in the face. We are committed to that. The battle is for the border. We do that first as a top priority, and we'll take care of these other obligations. Last question. Thank you.